Welcome and welcome to AR Talkies, அதாவது Avinash Ramachandran Talkies. Since I started this channel on the festive occasion of Pongal, let's kickstart the proceedings by talking about one among the slew of Indian films that hit screens worldwide over the past week. There is a starting point for everything and for ART, அதாவது Avinash Ramachandran Talkies. That starting point is Dhanush's latest film, Captain Miller. Just before the interval block of Captain Miller, which once again is divided into various chapters, something that Arun Matheswaran seems to like a lot, we are given the build-up to that crescendo. It involves the oppressors using the oppressed to get past forces stronger than themselves. It involves an almost mythical gemstone. It involves treachery. It involves an elaborate plan. It involves brotherhood. It involves bikes. It involves bombs. It involves bullets. I repeat, it is built up to a really fascinating point. There's also a promise to be kept. There is a member of the British Army who was evil and despicable, who was deserving of being murdered. Then there is Dhanush in a man bun, using a red towel as a mask, fire in his eyes, riding on a Triumph motorcycle with J.V. Prakash's score drilling into us that this is a mass elevation scene, lest we miss out on the 172 other pointers. And then, soon enough, the interval card is up. Arun and his team deliver on all that is promised, but yet there is a sense of something just not adding up. Was it the action choreography? Was it the score? Was it the lack of actual stakes? What was it that flattered to deceive? While such questions come up at one point or the other, Arun manages to seamlessly move from one set piece to another. While I wasn't too distracted by the thought clouds in my head, neither was I thoroughly engrossed in the narrative. The film begins with the matriarch of a native tribal people in pre-independence India telling children the history of their tribe and how one warrior stood against two sets of rival armies to safeguard a temple and the king. She tells them how the king, to honor the warrior, gave his tribe the land surrounding the temple and erected an idol for the slain tribal chief. Lamenting how they are not allowed to enter the temple, she instills the hope of the proverbial savior coming to save them from their plights. Her eldest son Sengolan is a freedom revolutionary and Annalisen is someone trying to find his true calling. When the younger brother Annalisen decides to enroll in the British Army, things go bad between him and his brother, and the village ostracizes Annal too. How did this wayward person become the determined killing machine, aka Captain Miller, and what happens to the temple, and what happens to the king's family, and what happens between Isan and Velmati, and what happens to Velmati's sister Shakuntala, and a million other subplots form the rest of the story. After receiving criticism about underwhelming writing in his films, Arun has gone into full writer mode in Captain Miller. While these layers work in a lot of places, it also tends to burden the plot in many others. For example, the entire temple conflict is dealt with sensitivity and sensibility, but it gets muddled in between a lot of things happening at any given moment in the film. While there are no doubts that the film might remind many of us of Dhanush's very own Karnan, directed by Mari Selvaraj, Captain Miller also reminded me of Avengers Civil War, no pun intended. Right from the title, it is clear that the film does allude to the Elam struggle, but the present setup does bring with it a unique set of challenges. Captain Miller talks about casteism and its inherent ugliness, the struggles of the oppressed, the inhuman systemic brutality that continues to this day, and how more often than not, hunters telling a story will never account for the bravery of the hunted. Captain Miller deals with a bunch of fascinating ideas, but not everything is fleshed out enough. There is almost a KGF-ish elevation of a particular peripheral character that is setting up the stage for Captain Miller 2. Yes, we understand that he would be at the center of everything in part 2, but we know very little about him. And it is clear that the casting for that character will be more intriguing and exciting than the character itself. Talking about characters, Arun populates Captain Miller with a number of actors and most of them get to do something worthwhile. While there is no doubt that Captain Miller is a Dhanush show through and through, actors like Elango Kumaravel, Kali Venkat, and Vijay Chandrasekhar bring a lot of gravitas and dignity to their roles. Despite the limited screen time, actors Sandeep Kishan, Nivedhithaa Sathish, Abdul Lee, Vinod Kishan, John Kokan, and Ashwin Kumar are quite effective. Some of these characters, unfortunately, have a sudden change of heart that feels so out of place. Even the outright villains become caricatures soon enough because we don't really spend time with their machinations. We are just asked to hate someone because the filmmaker and the score nudges us to. The random evilness that we see in certain characters has no precedence. Well, I haven't forgotten Shivraj Kumar aka Shivanna at all. That man is a firecracker, and it is clear that Nelson only showed a teaser of what the Karunada Chakravarti is really capable of. Electrifying screen presence is wonderfully balanced by a sense of vulnerability, and as Sengolan, Shivanna becomes as much a Tamil actor as any other actor on screen. Talking about other actors, honestly, Priyanka Arul Mohan gets an interesting enough role, but there are not enough scenes for her to actually grow on us. Her performance is distracting after a while, and her arc isn't rounded off either. When Isa, Dhanush's character, becomes Miller and then has an eventual change of heart, there is a beautiful visual involving fire. It's a terrific sight, and it's almost like Isa had to go through this trial of fire to become the Miller that everyone would fear. The visuals are stunning to say the least, and DOP Siddharth Nuni breathes freshness into a lot of frames, especially the wide shots that encompass the expanse of the land. He gets it right in the massive fights between huge armies. Naguran's editing pattern in Captain Miller gets some time to get used to, but the ones acquainted with the world of Arun Matheswaran would be familiar with this too. The film's artwork and research into the lives of the tribes is an intriguing experience that is worth seeing on the big screen, to be honest. The temples, the doors, the roads, the guns, the knives, the flora, the even bigger guns, the mustaches, and of course, the biggest guns are a sight to behold, since G.V. Prakash's score that hits the highs at most times but feels out of sync in certain others. In fact, that could be said of the entire film itself. While it gets things right, Captain Miller is a fascinating exploration of style, substance, and superstardom, all enveloped into a film about struggle for the land and rights. However, when it gets it wrong, it isn't like Captain Miller falls into the area of no redemption, but just that the build-up and elevation is so high that it is tough to move past these issues either. There is something about Dhanush that is comforting. When he walks away from a crowd running into his home after a particularly crumbling incident, I wanted to somehow stand next to him and just tell him that, Isa, you are loved. When he has fiery embers in his eyes after knowing he's in close proximity to a source of evil, I was afraid about the plight of the person in his mercy. He doesn't rain bullets on people just because it is cool. There is a strong reason for it. It might not make sense to anyone around him, and sometimes the writing doesn't allow the audience also to make sense of it, but the earnest violence ingrained in the activities of Captain Miller is convincing only because Dhanush makes us forget everything else. Thank you for watching the first episode of ART, adavdu Avinash Ramachandran Talkies. Do like, share and subscribe and let me know of what you thought about Captain Miller, and of course, yours truly's review of the same.